If you or your clients have been in persistent pain, you're trying to get back into the gym or other physical activity, and you're wondering, is it okay for me to experience pain? Should I be completely pain-free before I start exercising? I'm going to answer those questions for you today. In fact, I'm going to provide you a very comprehensive guide of how I navigate my clients through this exact process. In this video, you're going to figure out what is considered a normal pain response during exercise, how to navigate pain within the workout program, and so much more. Now, a couple caveats before I dive into my thought process here. One, make sure you've gotten checked out by a medical provider, especially in the case of an acute injury. This is not medical advice. This is really reserved for the person who's been in pain for an extended period of time. Most of the major structural issues have been ruled out, and you're trying to return to physical activity. Also, this is different than delayed onset muscle soreness or DOMS. You know what I'm talking about? Like if you do a lot of squats and your quads and glutes are really sore, or you're hitting the bench and you feel like your chest is ripped apart, like those are pretty normal responses. So you don't want to sweat those. In fact, one of the best things you can do is continue to work those areas. It's called the repeat bout effect. That can actually reduce some of the muscle soreness, and that oftentimes can last for up to 72 hours. Instead, we're going to focus on some of the normal pain responses that a lot of times people who've been in pain for a long period of time might experience when they return to physical activity. To understand what I'm talking about, let me give you a useful analogy. Let's say you wanted to get stronger at the bench press. If you want to get stronger at the bench press, you have to continue to add more weight, and you have to train the bench a frequency or a number of times in a given week so your body can adapt to that stimulus. If you were someone who never benches, or you're someone who benches really hard and then you have to take 2 weeks off before you bench again because you're too sore, or if you're someone who just stays at the bar the entire time, in all three of those instances, you're not really going to get stronger at the bench press. I think intuitively that makes a lot of sense. Yet, we don't apply the same thought process when it comes to increasing the amount of activity that we can do pain-free. But the thought process is still the same. I'm going to show you this in a very useful graphic that I had come across when I read the book Explain Pain by David Butler and Lorimer Moseley. And they talk about it in these terms right here. So I'm going to draw a fancy graph for you. X and Y axis. The X axis is going to be time. The Y axis is going to be activity levels. And let's just say at this arbitrary amount of activity, you experience pain. And this might be lower for someone who's been in persistent pain for an extended period of time. Now, before I go into what is the best strategy that we can utilize to increase the amount of activity that we can do before pain onset, let's go over the useless strategies that a lot of people use when they experience pain, especially if you've been in pain for a long period of time. The first one is what we call the if it hurts, don't do it strategy. And basically what this involves is the person will just kind of choose very safe activities, or maybe they'll be minimally physically active. This would be the equivalent of the person who just doesn't bench, but they want to get stronger at the bench. Well, what's going to happen over time is if you're not physically active, your tissues are going to become deconditioned. And when your tissues are deconditioned, if you've been in persistent pain, your pain system's kind of like, oh, well, I don't really have the physiological capabilities to tolerate physical activity, and ooh, that's kind of threatening, and that could be potentially problematic because I don't think I'm prepared to be able to do that. And so what will happen is, because your body's really smart, is it will lower that pain threshold, so then it's going to take even less activity for you to experience pain. And so then what will happen over time is you'll have to decrease your physical activity more and more. As I'm sure you can imagine, that's not desirable. Conversely, Some people push well beyond their pain threshold. Well, I gotta get this done, or pain don't hurt. These are the no pain, no gain crowd. And so when these people are confronted with a task that experiences pain, maybe that's right here, they go well beyond their capabilities. Much like the person who benches super hard one day, like insanely amount, right? Well, what happens is they experience pain, they go well beyond the limit, and your body's not stupid, folks. What will happen in that scenario is you'll have a flare-up in symptoms, maybe even have some swelling, you have a significant amount of pain because your body's trying to protect you to make sure you don't injure the areas in question. And so what will happen is you'll have that flare-up happen right about there. You'll have to take several days off to recover from that bout. And because you have to take so many days off, your body doesn't really get adequately conditioned. Your pain system is going to try to do everything in its power to make sure you don't do that again. And what you'll find is over time, you'll run into the same issue as the hurts don't do it crowd, where that pain response will kick in much more quickly than it did prior. And so then you just run into this cycle, but then over time, the problem is your physical activity levels decrease because you never really give yourself the opportunity to develop any conditioning to pain. The third group is what I like to call the play it safe group. And there's nothing wrong with the play it safe group, but these might be the people who, they found an appropriate amount of activity that they can do that's pain-free. And it could be much higher than the if it hurts, don't do it sort of crowd. And maybe they test the waters every once in a while, but they're not someone who's going to really try to push their physiological limits to the point where they might be able to do a lot more physical activity before they experience pain. And this would kind of be the equivalent of someone who just benches the bar and they never want to go beyond the bar. And so the thing with this group is they might not have the problems of the if it hurts, don't do it, or the no pain, no gain group, where eventually the pain threshold decreases, but they kind of keep things at status quo. It's like anytime that they want to push themselves, they don't, or they just don't have the physiological capacity to be able to push themselves to the point where they can do a lot of activities without having a significant flare-up, or they just don't want to go beyond what they're capable of. And there's nothing wrong with this. But I think a lot of us who maybe we've been in pain for a period of time, or we have goals that we want to achieve, we kind of have to figure out a way to push beyond this pain threshold so we can resume a lot of our movement goals that we so desire. So how do we do that in a manner without really setting off a pain flare-up or without having few complications? And that strategy, folks, is the House of Pain. And no, I'm not talking about Tyler Perry. I'm not going to ask you to jump around unless you want to do plyometrics. What I am going to do is I'm going to give you an analogy to illustrate how we can improve your activity tolerance without exacerbating pain symptoms. If you can think of pain like a house, what you want to do is you want to knock on the door of that house. You don't want to bust it down. That's the no pain, no gain. But you also don't want to just play on the lawn. If it hurts, don't do it. We want to find a middle ground. And so what that middle ground looks like in our graph, if pain level's here, we'll want to kind of go up to the barrier of pain, and we kind of want to hover around there. Maybe we go slightly under. Maybe we go a little bit over, so on and so forth. It's kind of like pushing just to your limit at the bench press. And then what will happen is over time, your body's going to recognize, oh, you know what? I did that before and it really wasn't that bad. You're going to start building some of the normal physiological gains that we would normally have when we're kind of pushing ourselves to the limit. So you'll have a lot of the protective factors within your body. And what will happen is over time, your threshold at which pain is set off is going to increase. And then we're going to be able to do a lot more physical activity without having symptom flare-ups. That's ultimately the goal. Folks, that is pain freedom. But here's what they don't teach you in Explain Pain. What we don't know the answer to is, well, what's an acceptable amount of pain within a workout? What's considered a flare-up of symptoms versus a normal response to exercise? I'm going to go through the strategies and the framework that I utilize to let me know what is considered okay versus not. First, let's dive into the exercise program itself. Let's say you're doing a session, you're performing step-ups, and you're experiencing pain during step-ups. What's considered normal? Well, you basically have 4 potential scenarios in this regard. The first is you have no pain. The second is you have pain that happens immediately. The third is you have pain that happens at the end. The fourth is you have pain afterwards, meaning you do the step-ups, feel good during, but then it's a little sore as soon as you're done. What do we do in each of these scenarios? I'll show you. I think the first one is kind of obvious. If you have no pain, then life is good. Move on. You can probably either increase your activity level the next time or whatever. That one's easy. But what happens if you have pain immediately? So you do one set and you're like, ooh, that really bugged my knee. What do I do then? There's a few different ways that we can tackle this specific problem. The first thing I would do, and I say this to all of my clients, is your technique on point? Maybe you want to film yourself. Maybe you want to make sure that your knee's not caving in when you're doing it. Maybe you want to make sure that you're stacked as you perform the step up. Always check this first. If you experience pain on the very first set, don't freak out. It's okay. Fine-tune some of the things that you can fine-tune. The other thing I would say in this scenario is you want to try the next set. It's not uncommon for people, if you've been in pain for some time, to have a little bit of pain when you try an exercise, but your body kind of gets warmed up, used to the stimulus, and you do the next set and you feel okay. So if that's the case, well then cool. I can just keep on moving and going through my program as prescribed. Now, if you do try it and you feel okay the next set, maybe you want to keep the same weight or the same amount of reps, so on and so forth, just to be on the safe side. We can always add more weight or reps or make things more challenging down the line. Because remember, when we're talking about improving someone's pain tolerance, we're playing the long game. So it's okay. You don't have to bump up 20 pounds every workout. Keep the same weight. Try to make it through the sets and gauge your response after the fact. I actually had this happen to a client this week. He said, I felt unrelenting back pain during the first set. He refined his technique, kept the weight the same. Next set was totally okay. Now, let's say you've tried those two things, but then the following sets also hurt. Well, in that scenario, then you want to stop for the day. And that's the key thing. It may be that your body's just not used to that stimulus, and that's okay. A lot of times what I've found is it might be a bad day for you, and maybe you do that exercise either a few days later or the following week, and things are okay. So we don't want to just completely quit the activity in question. It could just be that it hurt for some reason on that day, and it might be for reasons we don't know. Try it again in a subsequent session and gauge your response. If you try it again, let's say you're at your next program and when that's coming up, and you go over these two factors right here, the technique, and you try it with the same weight and it's okay, cool. Stay the course and then push on, push forward. If you do that and it still hurts, then you want to regress. You'll probably want to try something that's a little bit easier. So this could be a lot of things. If we use the step-up analogy again, maybe you're doing a 10-inch step-up, drop it down to a 6. See how that feels. Maybe choose a different exercise. Anything that's going to be not as challenging as the activity in question. So you can see when we're working through this, we don't just stop as soon as there's pain. We kind of think of it like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if I change this, or I wonder if I change that. You try to modify the variables within your control so that way you don't just completely stop exercise. And a lot of times if we can navigate things in this manner, we can continue to push ourselves to doing more activity without pain. What happens if we have pain at the end of the exercise? So this could be like maybe you have 3 sets of 10 of your step-ups and you start to feel some pain discomfort at rep number 8 on the 3rd set. Is that bad? Should I stop doing step-ups forever? No. A lot of times in that scenario, what you're probably dealing with is a fatiguing response. And if we kind of go back to the graph, it could be that we've kind of pushed for a while and we're starting to now eclipse that threshold. Totally okay. Your body's getting tired. Fatigue is a threat to our homeostasis. And so your body might produce pain to let you know, hey, we're kind of pushing ourselves to the limit. We got to be careful here. So if you're starting to experience pain towards the tail end of the sets, that's totally normal. That's not an uncommon response. You just probably want to stop at that point in time because your body's done. And now here's the thing. You might still have reps in the tank. And that's okay. Maybe you're like, well, you know, Zach, I can continue to push past this. I know I got the strength. I know I got the endurance to do it. Should I? No. Because what we're talking about is not improving strength. We're not talking about improving endurance. We're talking about improving our response to pain. That is a different physiological adaptation that we're trying to acquire. And we want to respect that physiological adaptation. So if we want to try to do more exercise without experiencing pain, we have to use pain as our guide in this case. So you want to push to the point where that pain response fatigues, and then you're going to reconvene and readapt depending on what the next thing is how your pain response is after the fact. Those are the key things that will happen within a session. But now we have to look at what happens after the fact. And so that's where point number 4, pain afterwards, comes into play. We have pain afterwards. This could be maybe at the end of the workout or the next day, so on and so forth. What's considered a normal response here and how should we operate? Generally, what I tell my Supreme clientele is if you have a pain response that is about 24 hours or less, this could be a minor flare-up in symptoms, it's probably okay. Probably considered a normal response. It's almost like delayed onset muscle soreness in a way. And that's not a bad thing. So if this happens, what I would do is keep the volume, so the amount that you did, the intensity, so the number of weight or the weight and the speed, etc., the same. And so then what you're going to do is you're going to gauge your response the next session. And if the next session is okay, then we can use that as a way to increase these things. If you get the same response, it may be that you need a few go-arounds of that amount of sets and reps. So we want to then just keep it the same. So meaning we're not going to increase the amount, we're not going to increase the intensity. It may be that our pain system just needs to really get used to that response. And so 24 hours or less, that's totally normal, not something that we need to sweat about. What happens if I have no pain? Because that'll happen too. No pain after the fact. Then praise the Lord, because you can probably then increase your physical activity level with that. That's awesome. We want that type of response because it means your body has deemed that the amount that you've done is safe, nothing to sweat. But folks, what happens if I get pain that's significantly greater than 24 hours? Maybe it's 36 or 48 hours, and not the cool Eddie Murphy, Nick Nolte kind. Well, in that case, it may have been that you push yourself beyond your limits, which that happens from time to time. It's not uncommon if we're talking about just not pain, where you go working really hard and you get super duper sore and you got to take a little bit more time off than you normally would. That's okay. Nothing to sweat. Happens to the best of us. If this happens, then what we want to do is we want to slightly decrease one variable. It doesn't mean that we stop doing step-ups. We never touch them again. We avoid the stairs, nothing like that. It may be that, I might wonder how I'll do if I just decrease the weight. Or maybe I drop off one set and I see how I respond to that. So we just make one small change and we gauge our response to that activity. Or maybe we regress the step height. There's a lot of ways that we can modify our activity levels that don't involve stopping the activity outright. And that, folks, is how we navigate trying to improve our physical activity levels if you are working with someone or you are someone who's been in persistent pain. We don't stop doing activity because you hurt. Instead, we want to use an intelligent approach to increasing our physical activity levels. Now, it may be that you recognize, Zach, you have terrible handwriting, or you're like, oh man, I wish I had just like a flow chart of this that I could use to increase my physical activity levels, and maybe I'll just keep this with me while I'm training so I can gauge my response, determine if I want to increase the sets and reps, decrease, or stay the same. Well, I got that for you right here. In the description below, you can click the link and download a flowchart of this thought process so that way you know how to best navigate your response to increasing your physical activity levels without dealing with pain and ensuring that you reach pain freedom. If you found this video useful or you absolutely hated it, well, why don't you go ahead and just hit the like and subscribe button and comment below and let me know what type of stuff you want to hear from me, and I will gladly help you out. Otherwise, thank you so much for tuning in. You've been an incredible, outstanding audience, and I hope that you keep it real, but not to the extent where things go wrong. Stay hungry, stay learning, stay moving, and I'll see you next time.